Today I'm going to be talking about sensory overload and a peculiar type of shutdown that I experience, and I'm wondering if other people have had such an experience. Um, I noticed that a couple of years ago, always felt like I was in a dream, like everything was fake. That I was observing myself from afar. Everything felt unreal, artificial. I would look at my hands and my limbs. They felt like they felt like a marionette. Like it felt like I was just an actor. That I was there was this weird controlling entity of my body that didn't really fit me. My limbs were something foreign. They were something I moved, but I wasn't really connected to them. I was kind of disconnected from my body. Um, Everything I saw, it looked two-dimensional, and it was almost like um, whatever I was seeing was being displayed on television screens pressed very, very close to my eyes. So they didn't really have, it had depth, but this kind of, there's this kind of two-dimensional idea, feeling. When I would, when I would have conversations with people, I would still be observing myself from afar, kind of. And when I was talking, I felt like what I was saying was artificial. Like I was just an actor, and and then we're all just acting on this stage. I felt like I didn't feel myself. I didn't feel like I was connected to the person who I'm trying to force myself to be and trying to act in this way. Um, my vision used to get really whitewashed. I would stare around, and all of a sudden, I felt really, really intense. It was almost an eye strain, and everything went very grainy and got very bright white, and I almost had to squint. There was a lot of visual snow. I saw visual snows everywhere, on every surface, on every object. I looked for it, and I saw the snow, and along with this eye strain. Um, so that also again reinforced the idea that whatever I'm seeing, there's something weird going on with what I'm looking at, and it's not real, and this is all just one dream. Um, my hearing, when I would be in a public place, and I would feel like this. All of a sudden, the din became something objective. It became just this sensory input line that I could choose to tap into or choose not to. It sounded like it was being played back to me on just an on an analog cassette. It was grainy. It didn't have the depth and tonal quality of actually being in a room. It was flat. It was, yeah. It was like it was listening to everything on mono. Um, and it wasn't and so even if everyone was really loud, still just with the sensation and how I process things, I could basically remove myself from it. So it took me a while to realize what this was. I was really convinced that it was this depersonalization disorder, which is a dissociative disorder, not necessarily like a classic dissociative disorder where you have multiple personalities or you're in a dissociative fugue, but it's really sensate, this sensation that things around me aren't real. Um, this kind of observing oneself from afar. So I bought books on it. I was very convinced with this depersonalization disorder. It described everything to a T, and this is something ineffable, right? And when I see a description of it, that's what I latched onto, this depersonalization disorder. Um, but I never really took. See, I'm very, very in tune to sensation. I can describe things and how they feel and to specific detail, but one of my difficulties is identifying emotions. So if I say, so for instance, if I'm angry or something, right? Like when I was younger, I never called it anger. I called it that I said I feel like my cells want to throw up. All my cells in my body, they want to throw up. I would take emotional experiences and isolate them into these specific figurative images and sensations. So there really wasn't general coherent idea of this is how I feel when I'm angry, this is how I feel when I'm anxious. They were all just snapshots of little sensation things that generally that emotional state would bring on. So if I was nervous, I would probably describe something about fluttering stomach, or the time that my palms get sweaty. But it wouldn't coalesce. It wouldn't show itself as just pure anxiety. So this depersonalization disorder thing it was only a year ago. So I didn't realize that it was anxiety based and it was sensory based too. I knew that it was a purely sensory experience, but I didn't take into account external factors that would have a play in causing some of the depersonalization. I used to think that this is all self-originating. This dissociation came completely from my own brain. It didn't matter it didn't matter where I was. It was all self-originating, right? I didn't make any connections between it being worse, let's say in public, versus me being by myself. But there was a pattern to this. It was only in public places, and when things got too loud, and when things were too bright, fluorescent lights often induce this. So what I was always categorizing as some depersonalization disorder was actually a sensory overload. And was basically a quiet shutdown. It was an adaptive shutdown. It was a shutdown that I could basically continue living and continue doing what I was always doing, meanwhile being absent from myself. It was a kind of constant shutdown state, and somehow it made me function. I functioned through this state, but meanwhile I really was far removed from everything. I felt very dissolved as a person. So throughout university, I was basically like this the whole time. Like in retrospect, I could say that, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the whole university experience in general, but I was actually quite sick at the time. I didn't know it, and this was a very adaptive kind of way to remove oneself from oneself. But nevertheless, I was basically in this state almost constantly. It just became my normal state, and I was afraid that it was going to be like that forever. So I spoke about this with my doctor, right? And it was only after the AS diagnosis that I started reading up on these kinds of experiences and realized that it was just just an adaptive mechanism to sensory overload. But meanwhile, I was still in that state quite a bit. It doesn't matter if I identified it as being something. I was still feeling dissociated. So I got put on a anticonvulsant drug called lamotrigine or Lamictal, and that seems to have really helped. I don't. I mean, this is just my idea, but since the dissociation depersonalization felt something, it was so physical. It wasn't, when I'm describing it figuratively, but the actual state was. I thought there was something wrong with my brain, right? Everything was felt. It was just, there was a cloud on you, and that was it, right? So I almost thought it was maybe a kind of seizure activity, because when I was younger, I would often get these kind of blips, I called them, of depersonalization. These brief moments where I didn't feel like I was in the world. I don't necessarily know if that's a kind of absence seizure, but there was something in my head that clicked. There's okay, now I feel it, now I don't. So I don't know if the lamotrigine is helping because it kind of quiets this kind of seizure-like activity. I don't know what it is, but nevertheless, it's definitely helped my sensory integration, and I guess, getting over some of the depersonalization. I still do feel dissociated in nerve-wracking environments. I think that's just my technique now. When I'm older, you develop techniques besides having a tantrum and a meltdown, and besides having maladaptive shutdowns where you're not talking to anybody. So this is just kind of, I guess it's my solution to acting normal and having nobody acknowledge that there's something wrong, that there's an issue. So it's just another way to reinforce my acting skills. So yeah, I'd be really interested to know if other people experience dissociation during sensory overload and what their shutdowns feel like. Yeah, so that's about it. Thanks for watching.